Well, Chairman, thank you for this opportunity. I was hoping you're going to let me go last so I could hear what my say first. But I'll give it my best shot. I mean, obviously, like many aspects of our society, nationally and across our state, that we're trying to look into a crystal ball that's not very clear to determine what it looks like 120 days from today, which is roughly September 5th is the date for our first football game here at Razorback Stadium versus the University of Nevada. So we're 120 days from that date. Right now, as a conference, we're focusing on that date and starting a 12-game football season along with a soccer season, a volleyball season, and a cross-country season. I think the first piece of that puzzle is, are all our campuses open to students? And if that's the case, that's kind of the first hurdle that I see for our Department of Athletics in having a football season. And obviously that's something that's determined by our university chancellor and our system president and the members of our board of trustees, and with direction from our governor of health department, if that is indeed going to be the case. But that is our plan right now. Obviously, after that, I mean, we're members of the Southeastern Conference here at the University of Arkansas Fayetteville and members of the NCAA. So after the guidance we receive on the local level from our university, our system, and our state, then we received direction from the Southeastern Conference as well as the NCAA. From a conference standpoint, we are focused, again, as I said, on starting September the 5th. We do have some options if we're not able to start on September the 5th, but the one we're evaluating and working towards right now is that September 5th option. I will tell you, on the heels of the governor's announcement to open health clubs across the state of Arkansas today, with the blessing of Chancellor Steinmetz, we are working on a plan to open our strength and conditioning rooms as well as our training rooms on June the 1st on our campus for voluntary workouts for our student athletes who live in the area. It would be our preference for them to come here to work out if they're in the area. Again, I don't foresee there being any SEC-sponsored athletic activity by June the 1st, but I think we will have the opportunity to have our weight room and training rooms open to our student athletes on a voluntary basis that live in the area. There would be still no on-campus housing available, to my knowledge, at that point in time. So I'll stop right there and see if you guys have any questions directly for me, or I don't know if you want my other two colleagues, ADs on the call, to give their spiel before we answer any questions.
I think we'll go institution by institution for questioning, and why don't we open up questions to Hunter from the trustees.
So, Hunter, have you and Dr. Steinmetz discussed any, or Dr. Bobbitt discussed any open housing for athletes that would like to come back and begin working on June 1st? Is that a possibility, or is that just a no?
Well, we have 75% of our athletes live off campus. The only group that lives on campus, the majority, are our international students and our freshmen. I think we're not quite prepared, to have our freshman student athletes on campus as of June the 1st, and I think we need to walk before we run. And so I think we have roughly about 60 student athletes that we're tracking right now that are back in the area of our 465 student athletes. I think once we make our facilities available to them on a volunteer basis, we'll see an influx of those students that have off-campus apartments and housing that are paying rent for those facilities. And quite candidly, that may be a little weary of being home with mom and dad, that are ready to come back and engage with their teammates and their strength coaches and their athletic trainers. But the earliest we have discussed of having some on-campus housing is as we begin the summer 2 session on or around July the 1st.
And then, if we start a football season on September 5th, when would you foresee starting practices? And I assume the NCAA will determine that.
I think we have a really good plan I think that 6 weeks out, roughly July the 15th, that would have a couple of weeks of an acclimation period where our student athletes would have some strength and conditioning training, as well as some walkthroughs and team meetings that would head into our regularly scheduled fall camp that is scheduled to begin on August the 5th. I think if we can get to a schedule where at the latest July 15th we have our fall sports student athletes on campus, I think we have a really good chance of starting a football season on time. Now, with that said, we're just one institution, the University of Arkansas. There's 125 Division I football institutions across our country that are from coast to coast and are in a variety of situations and maybe not as good as we have it right now from a health standpoint in our state. And so it really working through what that looks across our country. I mean, our first game is against Nevada. I think what things look like on the West Coast are drastically different than they look here in the state of Arkansas right now.
Hunter, this is John Goodson. I noticed the NCAA issued some guidelines in different stages of when you can bring your students back on campus and get them back involved in athletics. Do you see any issues with not being able to follow those guidelines?
Chairman, I do not. Our facilities and maintenance staff, along with our athletic trainers, our team physicians, and our strength conditioning coaches have worked out kind of a similar phased approach to opening up our facilities to our student athletes. And phase one, similar to the guidelines, would be roughly a 2-week phase, followed by a phase 2, followed by a phase 3. Again, I think it's very dependent on what our campus environment looks like if we have students back on campus. But we have a phased approach. And what I have instructed my staff and charged my staff is what we have to do is create confidence in really 3 groups. We've got to create confidence in our student athletes and their parents that we're doing everything that we can, that we have a plan in place to mitigate and minimize their risk and their son and daughter's risk to COVID-19. We don't have a cure. We can't eliminate the risk, but we can minimize the risk by how we disinfect our facilities, by the number of student athletes we allow in our facilities, by our coaches wearing masks when they're instructing our student athletes in those facilities. That second group that we've got to create confidence for, quite candidly, is our staff. And we have staff that varying ages and varying family dynamics that we've got to create some confidence that we're protecting them to the best of their ability. And then finally, that third group is if we get to the fall and have a season, we've got to make sure that our fans feel comfortable coming back to our venues, that we have created an environment and how we do our venues, how we queue people in line to get into our venues, how we queue them in line for concessions, et cetera, that they feel confident to come back to our venues. And so those are the 3 groups we're really working on plans, and we continue to use the word confidence. So we've got to create some confidence around those 3 groups, our student athletes and their parents, our staff, and our fans eventually, that they have confidence to re-engage with us.
I have one other question. I've been reading about your budget in the papers, which I have not seen yet, but is the budget that they write about in the papers, does that anticipate you being playing football this fall?
It does, and that's the budget that we submit to the university for approval, and the university, to my knowledge, ultimately submits that to the system and then the board for their approval. So that budget that we have submitted to date includes us playing football. It has some projections for football season and single game tickets. Right now, we're roughly at 92% of our football season tickets from the 2019 season have been renewed. New season ticket sales, as you might imagine, are slow, as people are anticipating whether or not we're going to have a football season before they purchase season tickets. But we have a great home schedule, and I think as soon as we announce that we're going to have a football season and have a football season with fans in the stands, that ticket sales will reflect that, and that's what's reflected in the current budget. But we do have some alternative scenarios that we would resubmit to the university for the board's approval if we don't have a football season, a modified football season. We have to dramatically adjust our revenue aspects of our budget.
Any other questions of Mr. Yurachek, any of the trustees before we move on?
Chair Goodson, this is Ed Fryer. I have a question. You talked about strength and conditioning training on a voluntary basis. Do you know what the schedule is for other SEC schools in terms of beginning that strength and conditioning on a voluntary basis?
Yes. So we have eliminated or stopped all athletic related activities through May the 31st. And with the blessing of the presidents and chancellors across our conference, as athletic directors, we continue to discuss that June 1st date as being the first opportunity that we could reopen our facilities for voluntary workouts. And that's the key word, voluntary workouts. There's some other workouts. This would still be student athletes volunteering to come back. This would not be structured by the 8-hour rule, the 20-hour rule. Right now, this would be on a voluntary basis, right?
So June 1st then is conference-wide. I misunderstood what you said a while ago.
Well, right. It may not be conference-wide. I can't speak for every other campus, but what we're discussing as athletic directors that we hope to get in front of the presidents and chancellors here in the next week or two is approval for that June 1st date. Now, each campus is a little bit different, and so while we may have the ability on June the 1st to have our students back on a voluntary basis, every campus may not follow suit.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? I have a question. I know that we, and I've asked this question to you before, when we sign a scholarship to a football player that's coming in the fall, and we do that in the spring, and I understand that basically their contracts are year to year. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's multi-year scholarships, but the majority, Chairman Goodson, are year to year that are renewed each summer.
And we pay them, those that live off campus, a stipend, maybe that's not the right term, some amount of money per month. Is that correct?
Yeah, they receive a living allowance check that's really there. If they were on campus, we'd be paying for their room and board. And so we take that money based on the cost of attendance figures we receive from the university. And so they'll receive a living allowance check each month. And we have continued to pay those the spring semester, and we will continue to pay those through the summer, whether our student athletes that are on scholarship are attending summer school or not, because many of them, the way apartment and housing leases are set up, they had to renew those leases back in January and February for this upcoming summer and fall and spring semester of 20 and 21. So we're continuing to pay those living allowance checks to our student athletes that are on scholarship.
You answered my question before I asked it. Thank you very much. And before we turn to Athletic Director Peterson, I read recently that looks like your basketball coach has signed a outstanding class is coming in, one of the top 5 or 6 in the country. Congratulations to you and Coach Musselman for your continued outstanding work.
No, he's done a great job. I mean, it speaks volumes that both our baseball and our men's basketball program signed top 5 classes this year. Our women's basketball program's not far behind, and I promise you that our football program is going to be on their heels soon. We have a group behind the scenes that's working. There's a conference group as well as a local group within our department, and we're looking at everything from, we have shuttle buses that shuttle fans from the outer parking lots, and what's the capacity of those shuttle buses moving forward? How do we queue people in line appropriately for those shuttle buses? We queue people in line to practice some social distancing when they're in line to get into the stadium. How do we queue people in line at concession stands? Can we create more points of sale for concessions so that there's fewer people in line close together? I mean, we've got an average attendance here in the past of anywhere between 50 and 60,000 people in a 75,000 seat. Hard to create some social distancing within the stadium bowl. And so whether that's advising our fans to wear masks, we're still 120 days away from the start of football season. So something that may sound and seem appropriate today may not be necessary or may be more than necessary when we get to September the 5th. So we're developing a plan based on what we know today, and then we'll continue to let that plan be fluid and evolve. But again, we've got to create some confidence in our fans that we have done what we can to mitigate and minimize the risk, but we'll never be able to totally eliminate the risk within our venue. And we're also looking at how we disinfect the stadium prior to and after and during every event that we have. And it's just not football. I mean, we draw 1,000+ fans to most of our women's soccer and volleyball games. And so we have multiple venues that we're also looking at and creating plans for.